Stop. Before you scroll past this like you scroll past everything else in your life. Stop. Somewhere on this earth right now, a man your exact age is dying with 13 years of unused life still sitting in his hands. He never spent it. He never even saw it. It just rotted there, while he refreshed a feed, rehearsed an argument that never happened, and called that living. You are doing the same thing. You just haven't been told yet. Marcus Aurelius sat in a tent on the edge of a collapsing empire, plague behind him, war in front of him, and he wrote himself a warning every single night. You could leave this life right now. Let that determine what you do, what you say, what you think. Not as despair, as discipline. He didn't have the luxury of pretending he had unlimited time, and neither do you. You've just been allowed to forget it. This video is not therapy. This is not motivation you'll feel for 10 minutes and discard by lunch. This is 8 execution points, drawn from men who buried friends, lost empires, and were exiled with nothing, and still built unbreakable minds. 13 years. That's the number we're hunting today. The years currently leaking out of you through habits you've never once interrogated. We're going to find the leak, and we're going to close it. If you're serious about this, not curious, serious, type "I reclaim my time" before you go one sentence further. Let's begin. Lesson 1. Command your attention, or someone else will rent it out for profit. Marcus Aurelius did not measure his days by the calendar. He measured them by what his mind was doing while his body moved through the hours. Most men think time is the enemy. It isn't. Your wandering, unsupervised attention is the enemy, and time is just the battlefield it bleeds out on. Right now, today, you have an organ inside your skull called the Stoics, called the hegemonikon, your ruling faculty, your inner commander. It is the only piece of you that decides where your focus actually goes. Most men have surrendered command of it without a fight. They let a notification drag their mind across the room. They let an old grudge replay in their skull for the 90th time, while their actual life sits in front of them, unattended, unguarded. Epictetus said it without mercy. Some things are within your control, and some are not. And the line between them is where your peace lives or dies. Your attention is within your control. Full stop. No negotiation. Every second you spend half present, reliving a conversation you can't change, or auditioning for a future that hasn't arrived, is a second stolen from the only territory you'll ever actually own. Right now. You don't get that ground back. It's gone. The way unguarded land is always gone. Not stolen in a single raid, but given away one undefended hour at a time. Here is the order. 3 times today, you will catch your mind drifting from where your body is standing. You will not punish yourself for the drift. Even disciplined men drift. You will simply reclaim the position. Notice, return, notice, return. This is not soft. This is closer to a soldier retaking a checkpoint than a man practicing mindfulness. Do this until it becomes instinct, because the alternative is spending your one existence narrating a life instead of living one. Marcus didn't write his private notebook to inspire future generations. He wrote it to drag his own mind back under his own command, night after night, because he knew the second he stopped commanding it, it would wander off and waste him. Take command of your hegemonikon today, or accept that something else will spend your attention for you, and bill you in years you'll never see again. Lesson 2. Your body is the only weapon you'll ever be issued. Stop letting it rust. The Stoics never separated mind from body the way modern men do. Seneca, dying slowly from what we now recognize as chronic illness, still trained his will against his flesh daily, not to deny the body, but to refuse to let it dictate terms. You have inherited a culture that treats the body like a problem to be hidden under clothing and convenience, instead of a machine to be maintained for war. That tightness in your shoulders, that 2 p.m. collapses in your energy, that low hum of fatigue you've mistaken for your personality, none of that is who you are. That's neglect, wearing your name tag. A Stoic does not ignore the body. He disciplines it, because an undisciplined body drags down an otherwise disciplined mind every single time. Marcus Aurelius rode at the front of his army into his 50s, despite illness that would have benched a lesser man, because he refused to let comfort become his commanding officer. Here is what nobody in the self-help space will tell you straight. Most of your physical decline isn't a dramatic injury, it's surrender by inches. The breath you don't take fully because your jaw has been clenched since this morning. The hours of stillness you call rest, but are actually just collapse. The stress response you trigger and then never complete, so your body stays on a war footing 24 hours a day for a war that ended that morning. You are not weak for feeling this. You are simply untrained. Here is the order. Twice daily, stop and run an inspection on your own body, the way an officer inspects equipment before deployment. Where is the tension? How is the breath? Shallow and high, or deep and low? What does the energy actually feel like? Not what you wish it felt like. No fixing yet. Just inspection. A man who cannot accurately read his own body cannot command it. The same way a commander who refuses bad reports from the field cannot win a war. Move daily. Not for aesthetics, for function. Because Marcus Aurelius did not care what his arms looked like. He cared whether his body could carry out the orders his mind gave it. Sleep like it's a discipline, not a defeat. Because your mind cannot be sharp, while your biology is begging for the rest you keep denying it. Your body is not separate from your philosophy. It is the only vessel your philosophy will ever be carried in. Treat it like equipment that has to last decades, because it does, and nobody is issuing you a second one. Lesson 3. Audit every person who has access to your peace, without sentiment. This is where most men flinch, because we've been taught loyalty is the highest virtue, regardless of cost. The Stoics disagreed. Epictetus, born into slavery and freed into a life of voluntary poverty, was ruthless about one thing: judge people by their actual effect on your character, not by history, obligation, or guilt. Not everyone who shares your blood, your past, or your group chat has earned permanent access to your mind. Some relationships make you sharper, calmer, more capable of holding your ground. Others require you to shrink, to manage someone else's chaos, while your own goals gather dust. This is not about cutting off everyone who's ever wronged you. That's weakness wearing the mask of strength. This is about precision. A Stoic doesn't fight every battle offered to him. He chooses which ground is worth defending, and he abandons the rest without apology. Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by senators who flattered him to his face and undermined him behind his back, didn't waste his finite hours hating them. He simply stopped feeding them access to his attention and his decisions. That's the discipline. Not rage, not confrontation, just withdrawal of supply. Here is the order. List the 5 people you spend the most hours with. After time with each one, ask one brutal question. Do I leave this interaction more myself or less, more capable or more depleted? If the honest answer is less, more depleted, you don't owe that person an explanation for distance. No is a complete sentence, and a Stoic doesn't pad it with guilt to make someone else comfortable, with a boundary that protects his own command. Some relationships can be repaired with a clear boundary, stated once, calmly, without renegotiation. Others cannot, and pretending otherwise is just cowardice dressed up as patience. You will not build the next 13 years of your life standing guard over people who drain the years you already have. Lesson 4. Treat your current opinions as a draft, not a monument. Most men stop learning the day they mistake comfort for wisdom. They build a fortress of conclusions they reached years ago, with information that's long since expired, and they defend that fortress like it's their identity, because admitting the walls are outdated feels like admitting they themselves are outdated. The Stoics called this a failure of logos. the failure to keep your reasoning aligned with reality, as it actually is, not as you decided it was years ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote constant reminders to himself that his understanding was incomplete by design, that the wise man holds his opinions the way a soldier holds territory, ready to adjust position the instant the terrain changes, because dying on outdated ground gains you nothing. Seneca, in exile, in disgrace, stripped of nearly everything Rome had given him, didn't cling to the man he used to be. He used the collapse to refine what was actually his, instead of what status had simply loaned him. That is the test of real learning. It costs you something. If a piece of information hasn't made you uncomfortable in years, you're not learning anymore, you're just confirming. Here is the order. Once a week, deliberately expose your thinking to something built to oppose it. A perspective you've avoided, an argument you've dismissed without examining, a conversation with someone who lives by different rules than you. You're not doing this to switch sides. You're doing this to stress test your own position the way Marcus stress tested his command decisions before committing troops. A belief that can't survive contact with disagreement was never strength. It was just an untested assumption wearing strength's uniform. The day you decide you've figured it all out is the day your mind stops fighting and starts decaying. And decay, unlike discipline, never asks your permission to keep going. Lesson 5. Know exactly what you're buying with your hours, because that's the only currency that was ever real. The Stoics had a different relationship with money than the one you inherited from advertising and envy. Money, to them, was simply a tool for securing the conditions of a good life. Nothing more, nothing less. It was never the goal. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men in Rome, wrote with contempt about men who measured their worth by possessions they didn't even enjoy, who worked themselves into exhaustion, accumulating things they had no time left to use. That is the trap most men walk into without ever naming it. Trading irreplaceable hours for replaceable objects, then being shocked, decades later, that the hours never came back but the objects already lost their meaning. Marcus Aurelius, who commanded the resources of an empire, lived with a deliberate plainness that scandalized people who expected an emperor to perform wealth. He understood something most men never learn, that lifestyle inflation isn't security, it's just a more expensive form of the same scarcity, because your expenses simply rise to consume whatever you earn, leaving you no more free than you were before the raise. Here is the order. For the next 30 days, track every dollar without judgment, purely as reconnaissance. Then categorize what you find, what was essential, what aligned with what you actually value, what was pure emotional patchwork for a feeling you didn't address directly. The categories will embarrass you, not because you're bad with money, but because you've been unconscious with it, the same way you've been unconscious with your attention and your body. Every purchase is a transaction with your own mortality. You are trading hours of a finite life for an object or an experience, and the only honest question is whether that trade was worth what it cost you. Debt, understood correctly, is borrowed time. You're spending tomorrow's hours to cover yesterday's impulse, and the interest is paid not just in money, but in the freedom you no longer have to walk away from situations that no longer serve you. Stoic wealth was never about accumulation. It was about needing less from the world, so the world had less leverage over you. Lesson 6. Name the habits running you before they run out the clock. Most men are not destroyed by one disaster. They are worn down by repetition they never examined. The same complaint rehearsed daily until it becomes identity. The same delay disguised as preparation. The same craving for approval disguised as ambition. Epictetus drew a hard line here. It is not events that disturb men, but the habitual judgments and reactions they bring to those events. Repeated so often, they stop noticing they're choosing them at all. Complaining without action is not processing. It's training your mind to scan for grievance until grievance is the only thing it knows how to find. Marcus Aurelius, surrounded by people who would have given him endless legitimate reasons to complain: betrayal, plague, war, grief, refused the habit on principle, not because he didn't feel the weight, but because he understood that rehearsing suffering multiplies it without producing a single solution. Waiting for the perfect moment to act is its own quiet addiction. You tell yourself you're preparing, but the years pass, and the preparation never resolves into action, because there will always be a more perfect moment just out of reach, by design, because perfect conditions are a story you tell yourself to justify staying still. Here is the order. For 7 days, observe. Don't change, just observe. Every time you complain without acting, every time you delay a decision you've already made in your gut, every time you check a screen for a hit of approval you could have generated yourself through actual accomplishment. You cannot discipline a pattern you refuse to name. Once named, the pattern loses its camouflage, and a habit without camouflage is just a choice waiting to be made differently. Lesson 7. Defend the silence, because that's where the real accounting happens. You've been trained to treat stillness as wasted time, as a gap to be filled with noise before discomfort can surface. The Stoics understood this exactly backward. Seneca warned that the busiest-looking men were often running from themselves, filling every hour so they'd never have to sit alone with an unexamined life.
Marcus Aurelius wrote his private reflections in the quiet hours precisely because that's where the actual command decisions of his character got made. Not in the noise of the Senate, in the silence afterward, where he had to face what he'd actually done with the day.
This is premeditatio malorum in its quietest form, not rehearsing catastrophe for its own sake, but using stillness to see your life clearly enough to prepare for what's coming, instead of sprinting past it in a fog of distraction. The man who cannot sit in silence cannot examine himself, and the man who cannot examine himself is simply repeating yesterday's mistakes with more confidence. Here is the order. Once daily, give yourself a stretch of time with no phone, no task, no input, just the unfiltered presence of your own mind. The resistance you feel is not boredom. It's withdrawal from constant stimulation, and pushing through it is how you reclaim access to thoughts you've been outrunning for years. This is not a weakness. This is reconnaissance on your own character, conducted by the only man who can actually do it. Lesson 8. The 13-year warning, and what you do with it starting today. 13 years, roughly 4,700 days of conscious adult life, gone to autopilot most men never examine until it's far too late to recover the time. Marcus Aurelius did not write his private reflections to comfort himself. He wrote them as a soldier writes a final letter, fully aware that today could be the last day issued to him, and structuring his conduct accordingly. That is amor fati in its hardest, least sentimental form. Not passive acceptance of fate, but the active decision to meet whatever time remains with full presence. Because the alternative is spending what's left the same unconscious way you spent what's already gone. The 13 years are not a sentence already served. They are a warning still being written, today, in how you spend the next 24 hours. You do not reclaim 13 years in one motion. You reclaim 1 hour, fully inhabited, and then another. And the discipline compounds the way debt compounds, except this time, working entirely in your favor. Before you commit to anything today, run it through the only filter that matters. If you were reviewing this life from its final hour, would you be glad you spent this hour on this? Not comfortable, not obligated, glad. That filter, applied without mercy, will strip away most of what's currently draining you, and what remains is the only material a real life is built from. You made it to the end of this, which already separates you from most men who clicked away the moment this got uncomfortable. That discomfort was the point. Command your attention, discipline your body, audit your relationships without sentiment, treat your beliefs as a draft under constant revision. Know exactly what your money is actually buying. Name the habits running you before they finish running out your clock. Defend your silence like territory, because it is. And remember that the 13 years are not lost yet. They are being decided right now, in this exact hour, by what you do the second this video ends. Marcus Aurelius did not become unshakable by accident. He built it one disciplined hour at a time, the same way you're about to. If you're done bleeding years to patterns you never chose, comment it below. I reclaim my years. And then go prove it with the next 24 hours of your life.